Well, that's not gone well. Over this thing. And welcome back to 0 to 60. Today I've got a look at my E39. If you're watching the channel last weekend when we drove to Sydney to pick up the M5 parts, I noticed that time towing the trailer that the steering felt off, like it needs a wheel alignment or something's loose possibly, but there's no clunking, no noises. It was just a strange sensation through the steering which I hadn't noticed before. It was very minor, and I thought it was just because we're towing a trailer. However, I've just had to pop to Brisbane, I've just come back, and it was starting to do it even worse. So now that we have a hoist, I'm going to bring it in, throw it up, and see if we can find out what's gone, and whether it's at the front end or the rear end, a bush, a control arm, or what it might be. Well, it's on the hoist. Basically all you can really do from here is just grab a pry bar and try and lever the bushes and the control arms to see if there's any play anywhere. Well, I think we found the issue. So the left-hand rear wheel has a noticeable amount of play in it. As soon as you grab the tyre on each end, you can actually feel it pivoting, and the wheel bearing's gone. So that, just having that little bit of play, that'll give that sensation through the car and make it sort of change direction as it's going over lips and that sort of stuff, which will be what it is. So now, I guess it's lucky I've got that parts car, because I'll just rip that one off there, throw it in here, and hopefully that fixes it. Okay, I'm back with the wheel bearing off of my parts car. And now, just got to get it onto this one. It was handy having the parts car there so I could sort of learn how to do it before showing you how to do it on this one, because some of the bolts were a massive pain to get to, especially when it was on the ground. Hopefully this one being on the hoist then will be a lot easier. Before you do get started, one of the things you will most definitely need is a 36mm 12-point socket. Unfortunately, we didn't actually have one the day I went to pull it off, so I actually had to run into town and grab one the following day. But yeah, you need that to undo the axle. So make sure you got one of those before you start. If you haven't, I'll put a link below so you can grab one online. All right, let's get started. The axle nut, as you can see, has these locks on it so that it cannot be undone, and it's pinched there and there onto the axle. All you've got to do is basically, with a punch, get into that peen, push it out so it's circular, and then you'll be able to wind it off. So let's do that. Now, to get to the 4 bolts holding the wheel bearing on, you do get a little bit of extra room if you push the drive shaft through a bit. Well, that's not gone well. You might be able to tell, this is now actually a few more days in the future, and the car's still on the hoist. I've never experienced a job like this. Usually things occur when you're trying to do a DIY or doing something, and they can be a little bit tricky, a little bit difficult that you've got to sort out and fix or work around, whatever. However, this 540 has just been failure after failure. So I think the last thing you would have seen is I was just tapping the end of the axle to get it out of the hub. Just with a hammer, with a rubber mallet even, because that's what I used on the parts car, and it just slid the axle back, gave you enough room to access the bolts to get the hub out, and then you were good to go. However, on my black 540, I started with a rubber mallet, and then worked up to a lump hammer, and then started belting it with the lump hammer, still no movement. After the lump hammer, I went to a small sledgehammer, still nothing, and then a blowtorch with heat. At this point, okay, we thought, all right, that's all right, we'll spray some more WD on it, and just leave it overnight, come back and attack it tomorrow. Same thing again, it was soaking all overnight, over everywhere, still would not budge. Ended up then getting it so hot that it wasn't glowing, but it turned blue, and all of the grease inside the hub melted and ran out. That's how hot it was. And then whacked it, still nothing. Then tried the heating and cooling method. So again, got it super, super hot, so you can't go near it, and then poured cold water over it to try and get it to crack and release. Nothing, tried it again, whilst hitting it, whilst pouring water over it, still nothing. So now it was a thing about not being beaten by this axle. Both Andrew and I were determined to get it out of the car. But keeping in mind, I do have a 535, my parts car, so if need be, I can just unbolt everything, the whole hub assembly, axle from the diff, and just replace everything. Gave up, went back to the parts car, unbolted the whole hub assembly from all of the control arms, unbolted the diff from the axle, unbolted the axle from the diff, did the same on this thing. The parts car, getting this off of the parts car was a bit of a mission because it is out the front, so it's on grass, so having it jacked up on one side whilst on grass is bloody sketchy, and obviously some of the bolts on the control arms were incredibly tight, but we got it done. I thought, sweet, this is it. I'll have the car off the hoist, get it outside, we can do Andrew's turbos. Come in here, put them side by side to just be a bit annoyed at them both, I guess. And the mounting points from the axle to the diff on the 540 were bigger than the 535. So it turns out they do run different diffs, even though all the suspension components are the same and everything else. So this won't bolt. This is the 535 axle, obviously, because it's still in one piece and looks okay. So it won't mount to the 540 diff. So another hurdle. So at this time I felt defeated. Got up early this morning and took it to a mate's place who has a press, because now we can't even put the 535 parts on here to get it done. So I took the 540 hub assembly to a mate's place with a press and tried to put it in there, but it was only a small press, like a 4-ton press, and it wouldn't do it, wouldn't budge. So I come back, came to work, and I ended up giving it to Andrew so he could go off to another mate's place who actually has a machining shop. And he has it is a 12-ton press. He has a lot of big machinery, also has an oxy, whereas we were using a blowtorch. And he's done a lot of work for us in the past. He can make things from scratch, very handy dude to know. So I thought, Ian will be able to fix it. Andrew ran around there just before, and I just got a call from him. They put it on the press, and it bottomed the press out. It was stressing the press, ended up hitting its release valve, so it was maxed out. It was a 12-ton press, and it was maxed out. So this is where we are now. I can't get the 540 axle out of the hub. I haven't got one to go in, even though I've got a whole other E39 V8. And it is stuck in there. And the car's stuck on the hoist. Basically, all I can really do now, Andrew is yelling at me every morning because this is on the hoist. He really wants to start his turbos. So I'm just gonna bolt the 535 hub assembly onto the control arms and not run an axle, because I've got to get this thing out off the hoist. I guess just push this thing out of here, and I'm going to have to buy a whole new 540 assembly. We'll have to see what happens. On the plus side, I have had lots of practice at working on the rear ends of these E39s now, so if you've got a second, I'll show you how to reassemble all the control arms and the hubs. well, that's the hub all back together. Now I've just got to get it off the hoist, roll it outside, and then we can start on Andrew's car. To be honest, although it doesn't work, I'm actually glad to be getting it off the hoist, finally. That's not gone well. Okay, so the runaway beamer. Glad we've got all this space for activities now. Yep. But it didn't hit anything, that was lucky. That was really lucky. Wasn't this car doing the skid, that's for sure. Tow it back up. Okay, we got a real four-wheel drive, we got a big cruiser come to tow us out. Look at that, easy peasy.